Hey everyone, CJ here, and welcome to the first Ahsoka breakdown. It's quite refreshing to see Star Wars take a return to the mystical and spiritual when it comes to the deep lore behind the galaxy. And right away, with the way that Dave Filoni is handling Ahsoka, Star Wars does feel like it's back to that classic style that George Lucas had during his run of Star Wars. So yes, much like a bunch of people are saying, Star Wars could potentially be saved by this. And I have no doubt in my mind that Ahsoka is going to be a great show overall and a great addition to the Star Wars lore. But with that, let's get right into episode 1. To my surprise, we got an opening crawl of sorts to the episode, and I wonder if we're going to be getting different episode crawls for each episode or just for this beginning opening shot of Ahsoka. It would be kind of nice if it is just this opening act of the first episode. In that way, you can consider the entire series as a Star Wars movie, just split into several parts. But one thing that I really liked, I don't know if my eyes were messing with me or it was really that high quality, but it really looked like I was watching this scene in 3D. Was it just me, or was it looking like the text was almost coming at you and it seemed like it was being written right on the camera with the space being so far away from the camera? It seemed like the depth was just so great. I really loved the effect, and it was honestly really, really cool. Just goes to show how far we've come in terms of graphics and cool little special effects like that. I love the aesthetics of the Rebel fleet and all the little intricacies when it comes to the standard procedures of space travel and the Rebel crew. It seemed very cool. And plus that protocol droid did look really cool in that deep blue. I honestly thought that the star map coordinates was on the actual plating, but it was just reflecting off the screen. But yeah, love the aesthetics of everything and the quality. It just felt like watching classic Star Wars again from the original trilogy. Love it. When Baylan and Shin first enter the hangar bay, oh man, I got chills. And with the music and the atmosphere of the scene, it totally made me feel like I was watching the opening scene to Phantom Menace again, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan first enter the scene. But you know that with these two, it's about to get tense really quick. It was really crazy to see how everything just escalated. Well, with the New Republic captain being like, nah, I'm gonna be dismissive because you ain't Jedi, because there's no such thing as Jedi anymore in this day and age. And Baylan's just like, you know what? Let's get wild on these guys. My apprentice. That was crazy. But yeah, Shin showing off her moves is really cool. And she's like super fast and savage. Whereas Baylan is more conserved, calm, and very calculating in his movements and all of his actions as well. Which is something that's completely understandable, well, with both of their characters as well. But that just proves how great the writing is. But yes, all these action shots. Oh, poor the New Republic officers, especially the Mon Calamari. No, not that guy. And once Baylan and Shin get Morgan Elsbeth out of prison and start heading out, it just wraps up what an amazing opening act was for this show. What a great way to start. This chapter, or at least this part, is called Master and Apprentice, which, having seen the episode, makes it very clear that, yep, it is definitely about that relationship between a master and an apprentice. And we'll just see how both pairs of master and students' relationships will play out during this episode. When we catch up with Ahsoka, she's at that spiritual site that we saw her in during the trailers. And later we find out that this is an ancient Night Sisters spiritual area. Now it makes sense with all the glyphs and the statues that are carved into the walls. Never would have thought or realized that they do kind of look like Mother Talzin, and now it all makes sense. Well, with the spiritual magic that we'll be exploring in the Ahsoka series. But overall, her trying to use the Force and figure out all these different ancient puzzles was actually really intriguing, and it was really cool to see. We know already that Ahsoka has been searching for a mysterious object that Elsbeth is after, but here we find out that Ahsoka is actually looking for a ancient artifact that will lead to a star map of sorts. But it was pretty cool to see the design of it being this like orb with glowing energies coming from within it, with all the markings on it. And not gonna lie, this reminded me both of an Apple of Eden from the Assassin's Creed series and and that star map orb thing from Treasure Planet. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'll just be referring to this little object artifact thing as one or the other. This sense of mystical magic and treasure hunting per se is such an intriguing way to open up the Star Wars series, because although it is slow, narratively it makes sense since this is all set up in clear story progression, as opposed to other shows and movies in which the character's doing nothing and it's meant to be set up as progression. But here it's clear that every single minute that's passing by is for a purpose, to push the story forward and intrigue us into the story and the character's motive. Yo, but when Ahsoka comes across the robot, not Magna Guard droid things that Elsbeth has, this fight was so cool, and I wasn't expecting it to be a 5v1, but to Ahsoka, that's nothing. That's just warm-up. Maybe not even warm-up, but this fight scene was so cool, especially how she utilizes her her signature move of the lightsaber spin circle thing to try to even out the odds and take them out one by one. And that fight was so cool. It was really awesome to see how the choreography in the show is going to be and how quick and dynamic each combat scene is going to be. It was really cool. I really liked it. Both my brother and I agree that Huang is going to be one of the funniest and probably one of the best characters of this series. I really just love him. He's so goofy and stuff. And David Tennant's performance is so great. And that, I feel like, is what really gives Huang the sense of popularity and hilarity as well. And as I was grabbing my screenshots, as you'll see soon enough, Huang just makes the funniest of faces. I mean, just look at that. Pretty goofy. So although I thought this scene was kind of cool in the sense of just the robots just about to explode and then Ahsoka has to flee in order to escape, who in the right mind gives their machines an explosion radius this large? And if so, why wouldn't you just use that as a weapon against your enemies and stuff? What is the point of having an explosion like that? And then things just wait. I'm being negative. It still made for a really great shot, and I really liked the scene too, but it just bothered me. I was like, yo, what if you had something important there and you were trying to get it or something like that, or if you try to use it in any other situation? I don't know. Am I the weird one here, or did you all think the same? Let me know in the comments down below. Another Huang face like, girl, or really, dude, really? It was cool seeing Hera enter this scene, and her interaction and reunion with Ahsoka was pretty nice to see, and definitely made it very clear that Ahsoka, for at least these 2 episodes, is very much Rebels Season 5, which is such a fun thing. And it's understandable that if you haven't seen any prior Star Wars things like Clone Wars or Rebels, and you jump into this very confused, that's understandable. But for those who did watch those shows, it is nice to see that we're just continuing on and reuniting with all of our familiar characters, and no one seems out of place, or at least too far out of character to the point where they would be unrecognizable. But yeah, Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance as Hera is still something I'm getting used to, but I do like her performance as Hera. Of course, I'm always trying to hear Vanessa Marshall's voice coming through Hera, but I can see the mannerisms is there, the way that Mary Elizabeth Winstead is acting as Hera, which adds another layer of cool factor to Hera in the Ahsoka show. Overall, good points for Hera's character in Ahsoka. When we see more of the teen dynamic, when Hera is explaining Ahsoka and Huang the situation at hand, and they bring up the idea of needing Sabine's help as well, we kind of see some hints as to the relationships between our characters in the time that's passed since we last saw them. Because apparently, there's this whole story of Ahsoka, who I never thought would be a Jedi Master, is actually a Jedi Master, and not only that, but has taken Sabine Wren as her apprentice. And to me, that is pretty cool, honestly. But the fact that none of that has been shown is what makes their upcoming interactions very interesting, to see our characters being forced to reunite under dire situations and circumstances, and having to push their feelings of the past aside in order for them to work together and stop Elsbeth and her schemes. When we catch up with what's going on in Lothal, it was pretty great to see Clancy Brown and Star Wars, which when I first saw him, I'm like, oh, cool, Clancy Brown's in Star Wars. I wonder who his character is. And then it hit me, wait a minute, he voiced the character in Rebels. So clearly this is the same character. And it's great to see that that character, Amadi, I believe his name is now governor of Lothal. And I feel like that's great character progression for his character, even though I barely remember his character from Rebels, I'm sorry. But it was still pretty cool to see how you can just take characters from pre-established shows and then just put them in the next chapter, and it's a continuous progression of the character, and it adds a nice sense of world building, in my opinion at least. Plus, the scene is clearly the same level as Rebels humor. Some might think it's funny, some might not, but it was still enjoyable and still added to the story, pacing and story-wise. When we catch up with Sabine doing Sabine things, her scene with the speeder chase and the Star Wars rock music, I really liked it. It was really, really cool. And it just showed viewers, new and old, who Sabine is as a character in terms of her personality and her thoughts on this new world during the time period. But yeah, she is still super, super cool. And pretty as well. Oh, the cute little loth cat. So cute and adorable. Look at the practical effects. Which was pretty good. Oh, sorry. It's hard to do this and not be distracted by how pretty Sabine is. But yeah, it was interesting to see that Sabine is living in what seemed to be Ezra's old place as she is continuing to miss Ezra to the point where she has even put away her Mandalorian gear. And she just hangs out here tinkering with different kinds of tech just to cope with all the time that's passed since the gang was back together again. Which adds a little bit more to her character and shows us where she's coming from right at the start of this new story. Loth cats are pretty cute. Imagine if they made Loth cats costumes for pets. Oh, that would be super adorable. We get more and more into Sabine's sense of emptiness with Ezra's disappearance. But the interesting thing from this scene was when she's listening to the recordings of him, I had thought that this was a previous recording before the finale of Rebels. But now from the dialogue, we can tell in a way that this is happening, or at least the recording of this happened after he disappeared with Thrawn. Which begs the interesting question, how does that work? Or am I wrong again, and this was before the Rebels ending? Let me know in the comments down below. But it would have been interesting if he managed to get a message out to her and then went radio silent because of whatever happened with him and Thrawn in the unknown regions. We shall soon see, hopefully later down the line in a future episode. When the story heads back to the ancient site from the beginning of the episode, we see that Shin and Baylan are here now too with Esbeth. And wow, when we get a shot of Shin's outfit, it looks so cool. I love the color scheme of it. Even though it has a sense of simplicity, it's still very elegant in the sense of a almost classic style of Force wielder outfit. The combat gear looks pretty cool. And the lightsaber hilt we'll get to later, but from my first impression of it, I love how intricate it is. The emitter looks cool. I love the rotational discs that are in some lightsaber designs, and the grip is pretty cool too. That cloth type grip always intrigued me, and Shin's overall design is actually pretty cool, especially when paired with Baylan's design. Love them both. They're all really cool looking and will most likely be great characters as well. Not to mention the makeup looks great, the hairstyles, and of course Shin's apprentice braid, which brings up the interesting thing that of course she is too young to have been born around the age of Jedi. So she is either most likely Baylan's daughter, or she could have just been picked up as a very, very youngling once Order 66 started. Or perhaps Baylan just found this child within the time between then and now who was Force sensitive and picked her up as his apprentice. But either way, we shall see which theory of ours will come true by the end. Hopefully it'll be revealed soon, but we shall see. It was cool to see our villains, or at least antagonists, all gathered together. We got to see how their characters bounce off each other, with their roles being very clear. Elsbeth is the leader of the group. Baylan is the advisor, since he has that foresight ability that he uses throughout the episode. Shin is the young, hot-headed enforcer. And then our brand new Inquisitor is also our secondary enforcer as well. He, in which, is something that we'll be getting to later in the video. the most intriguing thing was the relation between Balin and Shin. As she is still young and impressionable, she's always looking towards Balin for advice or a sense of admiration. Just a sense of what is needed of her by Balin, and Balin's always very stoic as well. I just love the way that both of the characters are written, and it does make the theory that has been going around of whether or not she is his actual daughter or not, which would be an intriguing extra level of greatness to their characters. Plus, I find it kind of cool that since he was around during the Age of Jedi, that he's very traditional in the classic Jedi motifs and practices, such as the Padawan braid and their lightsaber hilt design as well. It was pretty great that once Ahsoka and Sabine met up again, they instantly go back to their moments of disagreement and unease from their relation as master and student, which was pretty fun to see in the sense of it adds to their character and demonstrates the kind of master and apprentice relation that they did have when they were training together. But given the situation that they're in now, they understand that they have to put those feelings and thoughts aside in order to get to the bottom of this ancient map mystery. It was cool to see that Ahsoka acknowledges that Sabine is the best bet into figuring out and deciphering the mystery behind the space apple of Eden object thing. And although she's reluctant, she knows that she's helping for a good cause. I started to find the comedy of Ahsoka pretty good, and like I said before, reminded me a lot of the Rebels comedy too, which I liked. And also this screenshot was kind of funny too. And it's completely within Sabine's character to give off sarcasm as well, which makes her a great character in my opinion. And her scene's very fun to watch. As Sabine and Ahsoka begin to work through the mystery behind the map given off from the object, we get to see more and more hints to the character dynamic between the two as they were master and apprentice, and how everything went south only because of their differences in personality and character, which makes their relation to each other so interestingly cool, because opposing personalities end up making some of the greatest partnerships in fiction, or at least most of the time, or some of the time. When Huang brings up the lightsaber hilts of both Balin and Shin from the recorded video from the beginning of the episode, we get to see a better look at both of their lightsaber hilts. And although I talked a little bit about Shin's hilt, it is very surprising that her hilt isn't in any way based on Balin's lightsaber hilt. Usually you would see in Star Wars, I've noticed, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed too, that usually Master and Apprentice lightsaber hilts are very similar, since the Apprentice would usually pick up inspiration from their Master's hilt and then modify it to make it more personalized. But these two lightsabers are so very different. But I feel like the reason for that is since Balin was from the prequel era in classic Jedi time period, that his lightsaber is very much traditional in the choices of pieces. What with the big thick black bars on the grip, the big red button on the emitter, and the color mix of the silver and black, very reminiscent to the lightsaber hilts in Phantom Menace. And it would make sense that because Shin's is very different and a little bit more of a hybrid between classic motifs and more modern takes on it, it would make sense because she would have to have made her lightsaber hilt way after the fall of the Jedi. So it would make sense that their hilts are different. But nevertheless, both their hilts are still pretty cool. And I really hope that we get an explanation to their lightsaber crystals soon, either in the next episode, or the episode after, because that's a whole nother story too. Cool lightsaber hilts make me and Huang happy. Ahsoka and my viewers be like, cringe. When Sabine is instructed not to take the orb back with her to her place, Ahsoka immediately disappointed in that. But as the Sabine is making her way back, she's traced by a probe droid, and by Shin's probe droid too. And the little thing looks so cool. It's so like new tech, and it looks cool. It's very small and stuff, and it matches Shin's outfit too. This shot was so cool, and particularly this part of the scene, but with the music and the way that everything was, I was completely in awe, because this totally reminded me of Phantom Menace when this scene happened with Maul when he was using his probe droids. And I knew I had that feeling throughout the episode when it came to Shin and Balin, that they were just giving so much prequel vibes. And man, is that not a great example of how great Filoni's writing is for Ahsoka so far? Some pretty great stuff here. It was cool to see Hera and Ahsoka not only talk about what happened between Sabine and Ahsoka, but for Ahsoka to have some introspective into what it truly means to not only be a Jedi apprentice, but a Jedi master as well, to teach said apprentice everything they know about the Force and being a Jedi. It was also really great story, character building when Hera brings up the thought of being ready, both as a master or a student, that no one ever really knows when they're ready to do something, but when they feel it, then they are truly ready. Oh, sad Hyung. The scene in which Sabine figures out the riddle and mystery behind the mapping of the ceremonial area and the intricacies of the orb was pretty cool, and the visuals were pretty great too. It was also pretty cool how she managed to triangulate these odd-looking boulder obelisk things and managed to map out exactly the positioning of the orb's parts to match the mapping of the area. That made it really cool. And then it goes back to the thing that I mentioned earlier on, where this orb thing was pretty much like the Treasure Planet mapping, in the sense of there's buttons to click and you twist it around. It made for a pretty cool mystical artifact, especially when it opened up like this. This made for such a great visual, and man, is the whole mysticism behind all of this new stuff in Star Wars so cool. It was also really cool to visually explain the differences between the known galaxy and the unknown regions in this new mysterious galaxy. And it was pretty awesome just to see how they're completely separate things, and the map shows the path in which to reach said unknown regions. Naturally, a lot of people complain about Sabine taking the orb and causing this whole shenanigans to start. But without her having taken it and then being thwarted by the villains, the story wouldn't have progressed. So I feel like this was a necessary thing within the story. But speaking of the story, once she did figure out the mystery behind the orb, one of the robots came in and attacked her place, destroyed any data that she had recorded about it, and took the orb back to Shin. And you know that a fight's about to go down. But really good on Sabine for grabbing the lightsaber, because although as I mentioned earlier, she doesn't want to deal with anything with her warrior life since she's not using any of her Mando gear, she didn't pick up any blasters, but it's a good thing that she picked up the lightsaber, because she would have been wrecked by Shin, and we wouldn't have had a decently good lightsaber fight too. It was really cool to see these two characters, the young, hot-blooded characters trying to prove themselves to others, facing off against each other. One who's lost practice in lightsaber combat against someone who's consistently training in lightsaber combat. This obviously made for a wild fight, and definitely one-sided, but it was still really cool. And man, even though Sabine could be rusty when it comes to fighting, she still puts up a great fight against Shin. And I think even Shin was impressed too, which is why we reached the stab, which surprised me because I literally looked away from the screen for 1 second and I looked back and I'm like, wait a minute, she got stabbed? And yes, I know a lot of people don't like this trend of Star Wars doing characters being stabbed by lightsabers and being fine and alive, but hear me out. One thing that a lot of people are saying is valid in the sense that Qui-Gon didn't have the ability to get medical assistance right away. And in the next episode, we see that Sabine clearly got taken to a med bay like right away. So of course she would survive. We don't talk about Reva, so no, I'm not talking about Reva. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out was that sense of combat between these two. Sabine just defending her life and putting up a great fight. Shin is a force wielder who has never fought anyone else except for her master. And with that, when she encounters someone who's willing to fight with a lightsaber and who is decently formidable without the use of the force, she probably had that Saiyan warrior pride of sensibility being like, oh, you're actually pretty good at lightsaber fights, so I'm gonna non-fatally stab you so you can take this L. But you should get stronger so that way when we fight again, it'll be a much better fight next time. I feel like that's why the stab wasn't fatal at all. But I could be wrong, and maybe I'm just looking into it. But I'd like to believe that that's what Filoni's going for here. If you all agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments. I know this is a terrible shot of Sabine having taken the loss at that fight, but we do get a little look at the lightsaber hilt of Ezra that, according to Young in the next episode, she modified it, which begs the question of what modifications would you add to the lightsaber if she wasn't really fighting all that much? Unless if it implies she modified it when she was training. But still, why would you modify the lightsaber and how? These questions may be unanswered, but it still intrigues me more to what had happened during the training arc that we may or may not see. It sounds so cool. What a wild ending that was. And with that comes the end to the first episode of Ahsoka. And man, I love these credits. These credits are so cool, and I love the music behind it, the color schemes. It's all so great. But yes, back to my overall thoughts of Ahsoka. It is really great. Like, I know with the previous shows, they're not that great, but they still have their own merits. I feel like with Ahsoka so far, although slow, it still builds on the character dynamics and the story building overall, and it's a pretty great start to Ahsoka. Like, I'd give it praise, and I would probably give it 8 out of 9 or a 9 out of 10 if I were to rate it. 8 out of 9. But yes, only one could hope that it continues to be great with its high potential and very much Star Wars. But with that, I'll catch you in the next Ahsoka episode breakdown. I'm CJ, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye for now.